Hi everybody, I'm here to talk about those conclusion paragraphs that I promised you we would look at in the video. And so I am going to go into our D2L shell and go to where I have put the example response essays that are in a chapter that I copied in. And so if you go to response essay, down at the bottom of the table of contents on content, this is where you can find the instructions, and then this is where I put some supplemental. Actually, if you click here, you'll get both sections. So here's the instructions. Here's the secondary source document that I created last night in class based on the examples you guys were sharing in class. Here's that body paragraph that I wrote in class with the highlighting and the in-text citations I showed you. And down here are the other materials we've looked at during this assignment. So here's the supplemental chapter. I'm going to open that up. And I am going to open a Word document so we can jot down our notes. And I'll just shrink this down really small and put it off to the side so it's kind of like a notepad. Okay? So here's the chapter. Remember, I added this in D12 because we don't have a chapter in our textbook that goes over response essays specifically. So this chapter does, and then we have a bunch of other chapters that go over argumentation and definition and comparison contrast. You remember we talked about this in class one night. So you can use both to kind of understand what you're doing in this assignment. But this is the most important chapter really because it gives you background information on that blueprint stuff that I was talking to you about in class. You know, always having an introduction and a summary, and then your response is another word for reaction. I use response, the textbook uses reaction, so check out these questions that might help you to develop some body paragraphs as well. And then the conclusion, the chapter is really vague about how to do conclusions. So what I want to do is go into the examples and look at the conclusion paragraph. So a little bit of notating that I've done here, but the conclusion is here. And I'm just skimming it real quick and I want to read it to you guys. All right, so an idea that comes from this conclusion is that, I guess what I want to do really fast is sorry, I'm just kind of into my day here thinking, is give you guys a reminder that probably all the conclusions, oops, come on, bullet point, will have a little summary. Reminder, summary, repetition. What were you trying to show in the essay? So let me make that a little bit bigger. Sorry, I'm like thinking and typing at the same time. So what I'm trying to say here is you guys will have a little bit of, you know, repetition to tell your readers, this is why I wrote this essay. But don't belabor that point. Don't keep going on and on with that. I would just try to do that in a sentence and then try one of these other strategies that I'm about to list underneath. So other strategies that are better. Here's an example from the one that I just skimmed, and you guys can read this on your own time as well. This conclusion does gives a recommendation. And I'm really typing a lot here, so give a recommendation. Would you watch it again, read it again? Would you recommend that others do? Who? Everyone? Or specific groups? And why? I mean, so there's a lot right there in just that one idea for what you could do in a conclusion that would be different than just repeating what you've already said in your body. Okay? So remember last night during class we were talking about we were talking about the fact that your introduction should be engaging and the conclusion should be as well. Let's look at one more. If you scroll down to the second example, there's another response essay. So the first response essay was to a film like the one we looked at in class, the example New York Times review that we looked at. And this is based on a novel, so I'm going to the conclusion. I'm going to skim it real quick to see what the writer does. All right, so this conclusion tells what the text's primary message or lesson is. All right, and I would say that you could only use this example conclusion if you thought that you were doing an interpretive response. Remember last night in class I was talking to you about being able to merge the three different kinds of responses. There's the evaluative, the argumentative, and the interpretive. So I think this one only works. This one I'm going to highlight real quick. Only works if you're doing an interpretive. You can't do this one just willy-nilly and throw it in there. It won't connect to everything else. Okay, but this one could work with probably any of them because you're just recommending whether or not you think other people should experience this text that you are responding to. Here are some other ideas. If you start with a narrative, anecdote about yourself or about someone else, you should probably come back to the point of you bringing up that narrative in your conclusion. So I'll put, if you start with a narrative, come back to that story and reveal the significance of using it in comparison with the primary source. The response to the primary source. So that's an idea. Another idea might be that you make recommendations for how the piece could have been a lot better or more engaging. So this will only work for you if you are doing a harsh criticism of the text and want to give a recommendation, a different kind of recommendation this time, a recommendation to writers or the specific writer about how to solve the problems that didn't work for you. Another idea, if you are doing an evaluative response, the one where I said it's sort of a rhetorical analysis, you could, as a writer trying to learn from another writer, talk about what you did learn overall from the writer. And I'm going to clarify here, not topic specific, but about writing. I think this one could be a really good approach for a lot of you, only again if you're using that evaluative approach that I mentioned in class last night. So I'm trying to think if there are any other. You could go back yourself and look at the conclusion to the Incredibles 2 review. And I'll leave that for you to do, but that gives you, 5 different ideas for a conclusion, 4 different ideas for a conclusion. And then I'll just say one more general thing, and I mentioned this in the conclusion video about the memoirs from before. But remember that introductions and conclusions, I'm trying to make some symbols here. If you say something in the beginning, wrong hand, I have to mirror. If you say something in the beginning, you need to come back to it at the end, right? Whatever is in between kind of gets touched on in the end as well. So wherever you start with the essay, try to end with the essay in some way. And that should also help you to not just repeat. Because I don't mean just go back to the beginning and then repeat what it says. I mean, like, bring it full circle or carry through with what you were starting so that you end in a little bit of a different place. So I'll just put that here. So remember to mention where you start when you get to the end. Okay, so circling back to it, coming full circle, explain something that you started with that you didn't have a chance to explain at the beginning, and make sure that that is, a lot of writers will call this like tying up all the loose ends, right? So lots of ideas for you here. I will upload this file as well, and I hope you guys, I wish you lots of luck with the response essay revisions. I'm sure you guys will do fine. We had a lot of great peer work last night, and so I look forward to reading those drafts. I'll see you guys on Monday.